Parker Panthers. So I hope you guys are all doing well. I've missed you since we've been back in school together. I know I've been dojoing your parents with messages about going into Clever and hopefully accessing Mayan and some of the other programs that we have. If you remember, before the break, we had started the book Guest, and we actually got up to about chapter 7, but I know it's been a while. In fact, when I went to read on in the chapters, I had to go back and reread just so I could kind of get a picture in my head of what was going on. So I decided that I'm going to reread the book in its entirety, about a chapter a day. You can either wait until I get to chapter 7 to view, or if you also are not remembering very much about the book, you can view as I read this from the very beginning, from the first chapter. So I'm going to give it a go, and I hope that you guys like this. Again, this is Guest from Mary Downing Hahn. And we know she's a really scary writer. So this book, I can gather, takes place, or at least the setting is a long time ago. Some of the language also sounds different. Remember in class I had said that I thought the setting was like Ireland or Scotland? Well, I ended up reading a little bit about the book, and it's indeed taking place in Ireland a long time ago in the past. Okay, so let's get started. I was in a temper fit to blow the lid off a kettle of boiling water. And who wouldn't be? Since sunup, I've been doing chores. I'd milked the cow, hauled 2 buckets of water from the well, fed the chickens, and then fought the hens for their eggs. Now I was down on my knees, sweat-soaked and bug-bitten, yanking weeds from the vegetable patch. My hands were caked with mud, and my nose was burned as red as a strawberry. Midges hummed around my face and bit my ears, so it sounds like they're kind of like little flies or something. Wiping the sweat from my eyes, I yanked a thistle out by its roots, only to see 2 more hiding in the beans. I scowled at my baby brother Thomas, who lay nearby on the grass. "You," I muttered. "If it weren't for you, I'd be down the lane skipping rope with the village girls. But oh no, I must watch you and do chores as if I were a servant. You've ruined my life. That's what you've done. It's a wicked thing to say, but sometimes I wish you'd never been born." Ooh, that's pretty harsh for a sibling, a sister or brother, to tell another sister or brother. Thomas smiled at me and cooed as if I praised him. Ashamed, I clapped my hand over my mouth and hoped Ma'am hadn't heard me. But she was in the cottage, singing at her loom, weaving soft blankets to keep Thomas warm when winter came. I watched Thomas playing with his toes and chuckling to himself. Truth to tell, he was a really sweet baby. I'd be lying if I said he wasn't. He never fussed, never cried. He ate what he was fed, and he slept the whole night through. And he was beautiful, even though no one said so. When visitors came, they leaned over the cradle and frowned and scowled and shook their heads. "'Tis a pity he's so ugly and puny," they'd say. "Oh yes, he's a sickly one. He'll not live past his first year. And such a nasty temper he's got. No good will come of him. If I caught a fish half as ugly as that poor baby, I'd throw it back." It was as if each visitor tried to come up with a worse insult than the one before. And all the while, Ma'am and Daddo, remember we said that was the name for Mom and Dad, and I smiled and nodded in agreement. For all of us, even the youngest, knew it was bad luck to compliment a baby. Since the day my brother was born, I've been warned not to speak of his pretty curls or his blue eyes or his dimples. I mustn't boast of his sweet nature or praise him in any way. It was the kind folk we feared. Although no one in our village had seen them for many a year, they could be far away or just outside the cottage door. They were sly and full of tricks. and no matter what we called them, they were far from kind, though no one ever dared say that aloud either. If we spoke of them at all, it was to say they were wise, they were beautiful, they were brave and noble and honest in their dealings. When in truth, if we offended them, they burned our barns and cottages, stole our livestock, that meant like cows and chickens and sheep, animals like that, sent plagues to sicken us, cursed our fields with thistles, lamed our horses, and dried up our cows' milk. Worst of all, if the kind folk learned of a beautiful baby boy's birth, they'd steal him away and leave one of their own sickly creatures in his place. And what misery the changeling would bring to its new mother. As if it weren't bad enough that her own sweet baby was gone, changeling screamed and cried and bit and pinched and broke things. She'd have no rest, that poor mother. Sounds like those changelings are really kind of nasty. And so we did our best to keep Thomas safe. I watched him while Mam did her housework, and she and Dado watched him at night. We never even whispered sweet things to him for fear that the kind folk would come for him. Their spies were everywhere. Long-eared rabbits listened in the hedges, and sharp-eyed crows watched the chimney tops. Toads in ponds, fish in streams, foxes slinking by, any and all might carry messages to the kind folk. I stabbed my trowel into the dirt and dug out a stubborn thistle. I shouldn't have spoken so crossly to Thomas. He was too young to understand my words, but he must have heard the anger in my voice. A crow cawed, and I looked up to see him perched in a tree over my head. He ruffled his black wings and stared down at me. His dark eye reflected a sliver of light. Keeping watch on me, he cawed again. It sounded as if he was laughing at me. Suddenly, anxious, I glanced at Thomas. He just learned to sit up, and he was looking at me to make sure I'd noticed. The small chain he always wore around his neck lay in the grass. Its silver locket sparkled in the sunlight. Dropping the trowel, I ran to fetch the locket. Old Granny Hedgepath gave you this, Thomas, and you're not to take it off. You best do what that old witch says, or she'll eat you for dinner. Thomas laughed and clapped his hands. What did he know of witches and their ways? I tried to slip the necklace off his head, but he grabbed the chain and held it out for me to take. Giving things to people was his new game. Most people, including me, gave them back, but Matthew down the lane had run home with the wooden cow that Dado had carved for Thomas. I gone to his house and asked him for it. Baby, give it to me, Matthew wailed. Luckily for Thomas, but not for Matthew, his mam snatched the toy cow, handed it to me, and gave Matthew a smack. I took the chain from Thomas and smiled. Without thinking, I said, "Oh, Thomas, you're so sweet. How could I ever be vexed with you? You're the best baby in the world, and the prettiest." I'm thinking how earlier she sounded kind of angry at Thomas. So when she says, "How could I be vexed with you?" I'm thinking that vex might mean the same as angry, because that's how she was acting before. When I tried again to slip the chain over his head, he ducked away laughing. I held the necklace out, but instead of continuing the struggle, I sat in the grass and admired the necklace. The silver chain was finally made, and the heart-shaped locket was decorated all over with a cunning pattern of vines and flowers. I sighed. It was much too pretty to waste on a boy. In truth, I wanted the locket from the day Granny Hedgepath fastened the chain around my brother's neck. "Make sure Thomas wears this always," she told Mam. "Never remove it. He must eat and sleep with it around his neck. Even when you bathe him, make sure the locket stays fastened. It'll protect him from mischief." Placing her bony hand on Thomas's head, Granny added, "May the kind folk of the forest find joy elsewhere and ignore this poor, ugly baby." I was watching Granny from my shadowy corner, neither moving nor speaking. It frightened me to look at her, but she drew my eyes like the evil cockatrice. Her white hair was wild and uncombed. Sticks and leaves poked out of its tangles. She had long yellow fingernails as sharp as a hawk's talons, and her eyes were sunken so deep in their sockets I couldn't tell their color. Some said the old woman was a healer. Others said she was a witch. But everyone in the village agreed she knew magic and spells and walked in Mirkwood at midnight. They also knew not to anger her. Suddenly, Granny turned to me in my corner. "What are you sulking there, girl? I see your sly eyes. I hear the beat of your jealous heart. That necklace is for your brother. You have no need for it." She spoke as if I were a wicked girl, a bad sister, someone not to be trusted. Even though it was rude, I turned my head away and scowled at the floor. How had Granny guessed I wanted that necklace? It belonged around my neck, not my brother's. After Granny left, Ma'am said, "You shame me, Molly. I taught you to smile and curtsy when you see Granny Hedgepath, but you did neither. What must she think of you?" "I don't care what she thinks. Did you not hear what she said to me? She was hateful and rude." "No, it was you who was hateful and rude." Ma'am looked at me. "I hope you haven't made an enemy of that old woman." "I don't care if I have. I'm not afraid of her." If Ma'am had Granny's skill, she'd have known I was indeed scared of the old woman. I knew full well I should have been polite, but my tongue had a way of getting away from me. I said what I thought and didn't think about the consequences until it was too late. I know a few people like that. Now, far from Granny's prying eyes, I held the necklace up and watched it sparkle in the sunlight. "You want me to wear this, don't you?" I asked Thomas. "That's why you gave it to me." He smiled so widely I saw the buds of new teeth pushing up through his pink gums. Surely Thomas wouldn't come to harm if I wore the necklace for just a few moments. With care, I undid the clasp and fastened the chain around my neck. How beautiful it was. I should have given the necklace back to Thomas, but instead I tucked it inside my dress. I liked the smooth feel of the locket against my skin. Just for a little while, I thought, what harm could come to Thomas with me so near? It seemed at least a dozen thistles had sprouted while my back was turned. Their thorny stems hurt my hands, and their roots held the soil tightly. I tugged and tugged until my back hurt from bending over. If I did much more weeding, I'd be an old woman before I even grew up. I'd hobble around in old ragged clothes and end up as crazy as Granny Hedgepath. While I worked, a large cloud drifted across the sun and plunged the garden into its shadow. At the same time, the breeze dropped and a strange silence fell. No leaves rustled. Chickens stopped clucking and disappeared into their coop. No birds sang. No bees hummed in the distance. The colors of flowers and grass, trees and sky faded to gray. Worried, I got to my feet to check on Thomas. Suddenly, the world seemed to spin and lurch. Colors blurred and ran together. I saw two of everything. The sky was beneath me and the grass above me. Too dizzy to stand, I fell to the ground. The last thing I heard was a crow laughing. Okay, so this is the end of chapter 1. This is a good place to stop. Please go ahead and tune in every day, and I'll have another chapter read. I did take a sneak peek at the end. It gets kind of crazy as the book goes on, so if you're not really getting into it yet, give it just a little bit and it's gonna get wilder. Okay, so again, I miss you guys. I really wish I could see you, but I know that we all have to try to keep healthy, so hopefully not too long. And again, I look forward to seeing you guys as soon as I can. Love you guys. Bye bye.